There is no God. There has never been a God. There never will be a God. It's just all supernatural bull. That said, I now belong to a church.
It was weird, especially early childhood, like when you're homeschooled and that's literally part of your curriculum. So like during that time, I kind of didn't really take it to heart a whole lot. I just kind of like took it in stride. I went to youth group because of girls, which I don't know if you'd expect anything else from a kid that age. I sort of came out as agnostic when I was a freshman in college because I didn't have to keep on going to church or didn't have any reputation to hold up. And it's weird when you're in the Midwest in a private college and you say you don't really care if there's a God or not and find peace in nihilism. I guess that's it in a nutshell.
Well, I was a member of a church because my parents were a member of a church, and that's the way they wanted to raise me. I got confirmed at the age of 12 or whatever they confirm people in Protestant faith. When I started going to college, I read books by Ayn Rand that confirmed what I already was believing, that there is no God. There has never been a God, there never will be a God. It's just all supernatural bull. That said, I now belong to a church. Because the atheists hate the religious people. They're as bad as the evangelists. And I thought, well, that's no good. I don't want to be part of that. I'm not a hater. So I have not joined a church, but I attend a church on Wednesday evenings for dinners, and I talk to the people there, and they've accepted me for what I am, and I accept them for what they are, and we all get along wonderfully. They even invited me over to Thanksgiving. And they prayed, and I didn't, but, they were happy to do that, and I was happy to be there with them. They're really nice people, good people. I like people, and I like the community I get with people that want to help others. That's my goal in life, is helping others.
Having grown up in a Christian home that was on the mission field over in Africa for a couple of years, and in North Dakota for a couple of years, and Southeast Asia for a couple of years, I was surrounded by an international body of believers, which was really unique, and I'm very thankful for that opportunity. Saw the people of God doing really amazing things in different languages and different cultures. The Bible talks about how His word will be spread to all generations and in all tongues and tribes, and I'm just really grateful for that opportunity growing up to see that. And coming back to the United States after some time overseas, it definitely made me realize that my faith was something that could not just be a ticket to heaven, but rather Jesus calls us to live our lives in a way that reflects His love to those around us. So my faith growing up had times where I was super unsure of why I was following all these rules. But the more I learned about the heart of Jesus, Jesus talks about how we don't do the rules just to get the ticket to heaven, because that's not going to do it. We follow God's law and what He calls us to do because we love God, because He first loved us, and that's why we are called to love one another. So in times in my life, I've definitely seen my faith waver, but whenever my faith is wavering growing up, I've realized that my heart has been seeking things of this world. It's a journey, and it's one that we take with faith.
From a young age, it was just something that, it was just what I did. It was part of like the family. I'd go to church Sundays. I was told this is what we practice, this is what we believe, and so I just did it. As a kid, it never really held any like significance, because again, as a child, it's like you're in a church, like the traditions, but the understanding of the concepts wasn't quite there. It wasn't until like junior high when things started to shift for me. One of those things where it was like, if you mess up, God knows what you are doing. He knows what you're going to do. It was almost this kind of like predestination, like your fate was predetermined. And that freaked me out. I almost became fearful of God, of the God that I was taught to believe in? What if my destiny has become like, what if I become a serial killer? Like, I don't want that to happen. And so I would have these like almost panic attacks. God kind of became this soothsaying authoritarian figure, and that scared me. I was still practicing, but it was like I was practicing because I didn't want anything bad to happen, as opposed to wanting to practice because I found the faith to be beautiful or meaningful. There were certain beliefs that the Catholic tradition or the Catholic faith believed in that I didn't really believe in. Just certain rules, regulations that I kind of disagreed with, and so eventually it kind of my faith took on this. It was almost became like a religious buffet, almost like Catholicism was this buffet line of beliefs, and I would pick and choose which ones I wanted to believe in. I was taking less and less from the buffet line because I was realizing that I disagreed with so much stuff that I was taught in the beginning. And that eventually left me with an empty plate, so to say.
I grew up with Christian parents who had grown up going to church, but not really with a personal connection to God. But both of them had separate experiences as they got older, and they became born-again Christians. And our family was very much based on this idea of being born again in your faith, which is saying you're not just following rules, but that you have a personal relationship with God. When we were supposed to do things that seemed a little unconventional, my parents would always explain why, and it was always really personal. And so from a really young age, I always saw faith as being something really personal, really relational, and we were homeschooled, so the Bible is kind of part of our growing up. I think that some Christian homeschooling families kind of have this stereotype of being super awkward and a little uncomfortable, and so I always think it's kind of a compliment when someone says, "Oh, I didn't know you were homeschooled." I'm like, yes, I survived. Like, I made it under the radar and I'm a sneaky homeschooler. That's kind of an interesting thing to figure out, just not wanting to take on an identity of, oh, Christian homeschooler, but still being really honest that I still believe this stuff and it's still a really big part of my life, and I don't regret how I grew up. I also grew up knowing God. I didn't just know stories about him.
Well, religion and the very notion of God was a very fundamental part of who I guess was brought up to be in a certain sense. I mean, I just remember from a very young age always kind of thinking about who God was, who he wanted me to be, what he wanted me to do or not do. You know, my parents were missionaries, and my dad is pastor of an independent evangelical church in Cuenca, Ecuador. When I became an adult, I definitely found out that I had to make faith my own and had to find out what I believed and why I believed it. So once I became very involved with the church and the church plant, actually, which started out to as 15 people, and now it's, I think, over 2,000 people. I became very involved in that church, playing music, leading small groups, and caused me to want to go deeper into what Christianity was and what it meant for me, who the person of Jesus was, and what that meant for my life. And kind of through that journey, I reaffirmed some things that I was brought up to believe, and then just gradually made it my own. So that's kind of my upbringing and my early adulthood.
Life and suffering are so deeply intertwined. Is there divine purpose? Is there a point in asking why? A happenstance of chemicals, a wondrous natural miracle. Is this all we are? Orphan children of the storm.